Our next question comes from Bob Miller.
Jefferson, whoever becomes the mayor is going to have to deal with Occupy Portland. They've made it abundantly clear they're not going anywhere. Police resources are going to be stretched as they already have been. Do you believe that Mayor Sam Adams, handled the Occupy protests properly? If so, why? If not, how would you have handled it?
I think I would have done one or two things differently from the current mayor. I would have directly engaged more and would have had sort of skilled organizers doing more direct engagement with the sort of non-organizer organizers to make sure that there were less instances, or to avoid instances of real risk to human health and safety. And also work to pivot that energy to something positive and sustainable, whether it was a plan to move a meaningful portion of our public deposits out of national banks into local banks and credit unions, which do more lending, to punch above their weight in terms of lending to homegrown small businesses, and try to pivot some of that energy. I wouldn't have taken a trip to Asia had I known or planned or expected that I might be working to oust them in 5 weeks. If I thought they were going to be there for a year, maybe I'd go about my calendar. But if I'm going after them in 5 weeks, then I would stay there and keep a watchful eye. I did not call, and I think it would have been an enormous mistake, to authorize forcible removal of people in those encampments within the first week. An enormous mistake. We saw what happened in Oakland when that happened. Had we set an arbitrary timeline of, let's say, a week, we wouldn't have had several people linking arms for several hours. We would have had electronic hordes from around the country linking arms for several days. And the odds that we would have avoided anything less than the level of challenge we faced would be low. So I think what we've got to do is work to pivot that energy as best we can to positive and safe activity. And my time is up.
Eileen?
You know, Wall Street hit Main Street really hard. And I have a lot of compassion and empathy for the impetus behind the Occupy movement. And I think we have to take it very seriously. And what I've said since the day after the Occupy folks originally moved into the parks was that, first of all, I'm an old civil disobedience activist from way back when. In fact, I've been trained by the Berrigan brothers and have spent 15 days in jail for anti-nuclear protests many years ago. So I honor civil disobedience. But what you know about civil disobedience is that it is, you want to make a point, you're going to break a law to do it. In this case, it was anti-camping, and there's consequences for that you engage in. And I would have met with the protesters the day after they actually occupied the parks and said, let's figure out how do we transition this. We need to set a deadline. It would have been within a week, and I'm going to help make this a peaceful transition so that you can get your point made. And I've said that since the day after the parks were cleared. I mean, the day after the parks were were occupied. But I want to just say that I have had such a wonderful time building relationships with some of the Occupy protesters since then. They're very motivated individuals who are very organized around the environment, particularly around air quality and the overall concerns about emissions. And I'm actually looking forward to working with the Occupy folks. They have an office, and I think we can really welcome some of the ideas that they're putting forth.
Thank you. Charlie?
So the Occupy movement has raised important questions. Are we going to still have a middle class in this country? Are we going to have a future for the 99% of us who aren't the super rich, who aren't hedge fund managers? They've raised legitimate questions, and the First Amendment is there for people to be able to get in the streets and make their case. I would have started negotiating early to separate the camping from the movement. The movement is legitimate. The camping was a problem from the beginning, and it became obvious over time. And as a former parks commissioner, the idea of anyone taking over a park for their own purpose, no matter how much I love the cause, is a problematical idea. So I would have gone to them and said, let's get you into Pioneer Courthouse Square for the movement and find other places to house people. And now let's look forward, because the movement is still with us. Let's help them take on real issues of foreclosure, for example. We have a foreclosure crisis in this country. Here, too, let's look for ways for that civic energy that wants to help the middle class deal with a real issue. Negotiate with our local banks. The city deposits $3.5 billion in banks every year. Let's use that leverage to make sure that there's a great foreclosure avoidance program for any Portland homeowner who's struggling to pay their mortgage. I think we can help as leaders. I'll help as a leader help the movement get to things that will make a difference. And I think that's where they want to go.
Thank you.